Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Sens podcast. I am joined by Derek Lee, the SenShot contributor. You've probably seen a bunch of his work on Twitter. He does amazing stuff. So if you haven't read his articles, definitely head on over there to read some. I'll have some links in when we post the episode on Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. Thank you for joining me, Derek. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great despite the crappy weather that we're having up here in Muskoka. I think, all things considering, I'm happy to be joining you this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's not overly pretty here in Ottawa. It's been relatively rainy the last couple of days, but I mean, it's better than snow, right?
That's right. I don't even want to say the word.
I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Minnesota just had like a giant snowfall warning, like a blizzard warning the other day. And like, I know that's coming and I'm not about it.
Yeah, same here. I'm not looking forward to getting up super early to clean the car off for work.
Yeah, I know that's not ideal.
No.
But on today's episode, we got a bunch to talk about. We're going to talk about the Connor Brown and Anthony Duclair situation. And I know, and I mean, if you follow you on Twitter, we all know how much of a Duclair fan you are. So we'll jump into that real quick about what do you think of that contract demand from Duclair?
Yeah, so you'll know that I reacted because I definitely reacted when the news first came out. And it was a series of events. So it came out that Duclair was being basically given away. And then we signed Eric Branson for, and his cap hit was $4 million. So immediately I reacted and I was furious with it. I mean, Duclair was their leading goal getter, only 23 goals, but still, I felt like he could be maybe not a core member of the team, but at least warranted a couple years for a return to see what he could do. But then when the contract demands came out and broke, I mean, he was asking $5 million over 5 years. I'm the biggest Duclair fan, as you said. I don't know what he was thinking, not having an agent representing him. And I think he's a little bit off his rocker if he's asking for 5 years, $5 million. So my perspective on it has completely changed. I would love to see Duclair back, but that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can all agree that, Duclair at maybe, $3 million is a high number, but probably worth it depending on which Duclair you're going to get. Are we going to get the Duclair from the beginning of the year who had like 31 points, or are we going to get the Duclair in the back half of the year who got, 9 points? And so for that to come out and then Connor Brown to come out, and I know it's arbitration. I know that, that whole process is, bid high on yourself and the team bids low, but I still think 4.8 for a guy who hasn't, I think, put up 40 points. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the other part to that is just the right wing depth that Ottawa's acquired. Like the move for Dadonov really changes the landscape for Ottawa. I mean, when you go out and get a guy who is consistent and can put up points, but also just play a complete game, and that's what Connor Brown brought you. Someone who the floor is high on. He's going to at least go out and compete and be very good defensively. But Dadonov brings a lot of those qualities, and he's way better offensively. So it does change the landscape for 3 years. And then we've got, Batherson, Abramov, Balsers. Are you going to move Colin White to the right side? It starts to fill up a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at Dadonov, I think that was kind of the trade signing that we needed. But to talk about that a little bit more, what importance did Anisimov have? There was talks that, they had a really good chat and Anisimov had nothing but good things to say. Do you think as a fan base we're underappreciating Anisimov and we're kind of saying that, he's our fourth line center, even though when he was healthy, he was one of our more consistent players. He was good offensively. He was on the power play. Do you think that, we could see Anisimov as our number one center this coming season?
Absolutely. I think you could build a case for it. I mean, suddenly the Zach Smith trade looks pretty damn good right now, considering Anisimov did a lot of the talking to acquire Dadonov. So yeah, there's no reason really with the center depth that we have right now. It's there is no number one center, if we're being honest, for next season. You're hoping that at some point in the next couple of seasons, Tim Stützle becomes that guy. But for now, I mean, Colin White, he had a down season. Chris Tierney, he's again kind of a responsible player and could maybe play that role. And then Josh Norris and Logan Brown, I mean, I don't know that you throw them into the wolves, so to speak, and have them playing number one center minutes. So is there a possibility that you put Dadonov with Anisimov and have them together on a line? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that Ottawa went from being this team that kind of stayed away from Russians. We had Gonchar, we had Kovalev and whatnot, but we kind of stayed away from Russians. And then now all of a sudden we have like 5 in our roster. We drafted Sokorov, we have Abramov, we signed Zub earlier after the season was canceled, and then we signed Dadonov. It's just interesting to see kind of the philosophy change from this not very Russian team to, I think we have the most Russians on a roster, at least on the NHL level, in the league. I know last year we had like 5 or 4, and we were up there, I think, with Washington. I don't think that's changed much.
Yeah, the interesting part to that is, what was it that kind of changed their philosophy on Russians? I mean, suddenly they just kind of started believing that, they could in fact add Russians to their roster because, like you said, prior to, it seemed blatant that they were avoiding Russians. So now to go from, 0 and in a matter of a couple of years, you're getting as many as 5 Russians on the team. I mean, that's a huge change.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like the Russians that we had weren't playing well. Kovalev, back end of his career, so was Gonchar, but they were still important pieces to what we had when they were here. I think it was just Russians got such a bad rap. I think we drafted a couple that just refused to come over and things like that, where it kind of changed. Like when you're drafting a Russian, and I mean, this is the same with Europeans because as a whole, because we have Wilkstrand, who out of Sweden, I think a couple of years ago, everyone was so high on it. He just refuses to come over. He never wanted to. He stayed in Sweden. I don't really know exactly why. I think there was some family issues that kind of happened, and he's like, I want to stay in Sweden. So like European prospects, you really have no idea how they're going to plan out in terms of coming north. And I think they were just more of like better safe than sorry.
Yeah. And I think the other part to that is now, with the prospect pool being one of, if not the best in the entire NHL, it allows you to swing for the fences a little bit on some players. So if you want to take a couple of risks, you can do so. And I mean, Sokolov is a perfect example of that, a 20-year-old who they go out and take a chance on. And I think he has some high upside. Like, I really, really like that pick.
And I mean, I think Batherson has a lot to do with that pick because they were teammates in Cape Breton. He was teammates with Mandalozzi. But, Batherson, I believe, was an overager when he was drafted. He was in his 2nd or 3rd draft, and they've had success with him. So they're look at this guy, he seems like he'll be a solid middle 6. I don't really see him being a top 6. He'll probably be 2nd or 3rd line, but power play, penalty kill, he seems like a guy that can play in all situations and produce. And I mean, hey, if he's gotten better every year, like coaches have said, he's going to start off in Belleville playing the right side, probably filling in for Batherson, to be honest, and we'll really be able to see what he can do at the next level.
Absolutely. And I mean, the guy is like a train. He's built like a train. He's like 237 pounds or something like that. He's huge. So having, someone that big on your right side will be, detrimental for the opposition when that guy is coming down the wing.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you put him with Tkachuk and Logan Brown as a line. That's a lot of size and a lot of pounding.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Ottawa's philosophy has been clear. I mean, they're trying to get players that are a pain in the ass to play against. And I think they've done so this offseason.
Yeah, and I mean, moving on from that or continuing that, Pierre Dorion has done a really good job. And I think, say what you want about Melnyk, he's somewhat started to hold his end of the bargain up, going out signing Dadonov. I think if most Sens fans a couple of years ago, even last offseason, if we signed it, like if Dadonov expressed interest, and no one would believe that we would sign him. And I think even this year we were kind of a dark horse to sign him. But, Melnick has somewhat started to put his money where his mouth is.
I think, yeah, you said it best. I mean, if there was anyone kind of on the fence of, whether they should buy in or not right now, I think it's worth it to buy in. I mean, next year is going to be a lot of fun. Probably, not going to be the best standings wise. And, we'll get into that later, but it's still going to be a lot of fun, and you want to be along for the ride. So if you're on the fence about buying in, I think now is the time to buy in, because you want to be here for some of the downfall so that you could see that rise and not just kind of jump on the bandwagon when, ultimately it happens, because I think it's going to happen now.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always been I know not everyone's a Melnick fan, and I've had my own issues with Melnick at times, and I think everyone has. But for me, I love the confidence that he has given to this club and to Pierre Dorion. It's a bold claim saying, oh, we're going to win a cup in 4 years, because realistically, you never know. You can't predict stuff like that. But the confidence that he's showing in that is, Pierre Dorion has a plan. Everyone's focusing on that plan. We're not deviating from that plan. And if this plan works out, we will win a cup. And as a fan base, I think that's all you can really hope for from not just management, from ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the window is going to be open for a number of years. I mean, most likely, if they stay kind of building this product organically, which I think is the plan, it's the right way to do it. They're not taking chances on free agents. They signed Dadonov for 3 years, which, for a 31-year-old is the perfect player to get you to the next step for your ultimately your core players to begin to take over. And I think when I look at it as a whole, I think really after this season, we really start to take a step forward. And I think that's when we'll really see people jump on board if they haven't already.
Yeah, I mean, if the jerseys haven't got you on board, I don't really know what else will. Continuing with Pierre Dorion, it started off with the Matt Murray trade. I think there was speculation, I think, for quite some time that Ottawa has kicked tires with Matt Murray. But under contract, we had Hogberg and Nielsen. There was rumors that Nielsen would be ready for whenever the season started. So going out and getting a goaltender didn't seem like a good idea, because why have 3 goaltenders under an HL contract? Obviously, it sounds like Nielsen's not coming back, unfortunately. He had his time in Ottawa. He was decent. He was a solid stopgap goaltender. Hope him nothing but health and getting back from his concussions. But that Matt Murray trade, who he gave up and how much he gave up, is ridiculous. A second-round pick and a B-level prospect. That's a win right there.
For a 26-year-old goaltender, absolutely. I mean, we gave up next to nothing for a guy who's won 2 Stanley Cups before the age of 26. I mean, that's insane. And yeah, the potential that Matt Murray brings is still very much there. I know numbers-wise, he had a down season last year. He was definitely being pushed a lot by Tristan Jarry. And I don't know that he did well in that situation. But now we're talking about Matt Murray coming on and definitely being the number one guy. He's going to have a little bit of pushback from some of the prospects, but not nearly what he had last season with Tristan Jarry. And I think if he can return to that 919, 920 save percentage that he's put up before, just a couple of seasons ago, we're looking at a steal, an absolute steal.
Yeah, and I mean, then you had to figure in the contract. I think it's 6.25 over 4 years. I think for a 27-year-old or a goaltender who will be like 30, 31 at the end of his contract, that's a great deal. You're betting on him going back to form. You look at last year's anomaly. You dealt with your injuries. Pittsburgh fans weren't necessarily the nicest, and I wonder how that kind of affected him mentally, because I know he was dealing with the loss of his father through all this and whatnot. So if you can get him back to one of the 917, 920 save percentage, 6.25 is a steal even in that kind of regard cap wise, considering we're not cap strapped over the course of his contract.
Yeah, and I look at it in a couple of different ways as well. I look at it as, that was kind of the first domino that fell in the offseason. That move for Matt Murray also sent a message to players like Brady Tkachuk, who we need to re-sign, and players like Dadonov, who they were able to acquire in free agency. The message was, if we like you enough, we will spend money on you, and we'll show you that commitment, for a long period of time. And that's the message that Matt Murray got, that the organization believes that he can return to form. And so I have no problem with spending, like you said, for a team that's not going to be cap strapped or even close. For a team like Ottawa to spend 6.25 per season, I don't have any problem with it.
What do you think of it? Like, are you worried that Tkachuk hasn't signed? I know they've come out and said that, they're going to see what the landscape is, which I think is good on both parts. Flat cap and whatnot. Don't really know when next season is going to start. Are you one of those fans that look at it as like glass half empty or glass half full kind of situation?
I always try to come in somewhere in the middle. So maybe glass half full. So I'm looking at it in a couple of different ways. I mean, the market right now, I could see Tkachuk's perspective and maybe even the team's perspective. It's just kind of a funky market right now with COVID going on and everything else. And he does have, another year left. So there's a lot of time left to re-sign that contract. And I think Tkachuk, in a way, is probably betting on himself. He's betting that he's going to have a really productive season. And he could, in fact, increase his value quite a bit if he does that. Whereas, Thomas Chabot signed relatively early, I think a year before his contract was up. So I think Tkachuk and his family, who are probably very much in on this decision, are helping him to make the best decision for him. And I have no problem with that. I'm confident that Ottawa can get a long-term deal done with Brady Tkachuk. And I think when they do so, they'll most likely make him the captain of the team.
Yeah, and I mean, if you ask Adidas, they probably already know he's going to be captain. I mean, for the people who bought, I was going to buy a jersey, but I've told, my big thing is I didn't want a jersey that had a big player on it. I know everyone's going to be rocking the Shabots and the Tkachuks. Right now, I put out a poll there. It sounds like Batherson's the favorite, and 19 always looks good. We've seen 19 on that jersey plenty of times. So I think Batherson might be the way to go for me with Ryan not being on the team anymore.
I love what you said. I love getting jerseys that not everyone's going to have. You're going to go to a game and you're going to see how many Chabot and Tkachuk jerseys and even Stützle now are you going to see a ton of them. I did kind of the same thing. I went off the grid a little bit and went for an Adler Mannheim Tim Stützle jersey.
That's
I tried to, and I actually got scammed.
Oh, right.
My own fault, but I got scammed on the jersey. It was on a Hong Kong website. I didn't even look. I literally hit buy now, check out, put my credit card information in, and now I'm dealing with my bank to get the money back. But I will find a reliable site to get that jersey. I want that jersey.
Hey, well, I mean, anyone who's listening to this, if you know a way to get Adler Mannheim jersey, that'd be let Derek know on Twitter. Find him at DLee075 on Twitter. Let him know. Personally, I was very tempted to get a Shane Pinto jersey. But Zaitsev wears 22, and that's the number that Pinto wears. The chances of him wearing that in Ottawa are very slim unless Zaitsev leaves. So it's one of those jerseys where I'm going to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, you don't want to play a numbers guessing game.
Yeah, and I mean,
in case.
At least I don't have to go out and buy a new Landon jersey because he went up and switched his number.
I've seen that, the 24. I like it. It looks
honestly
good.
It looks so good. And I mean, he said it earlier in the year in a piece with Belleville. They were talking about his jersey number. They did a whole thing on jersey numbers, and he said that once he's up in the NHL next year full time, he's going to switch to 24. And I'm like, that'd be sick.
Yeah, I think 24 looks phenomenal on him. 86, I mean, that's what he was repping before, I think.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a, I don't know, I always found it to be like a forwards number just because it was so high and I don't know, kind of funky. 24, I think, will suit him 100%. He's an offensive defenseman. I like it.
I think he'll probably be one of the first players to wear 24, if I'm not mistaken, since Anton Volchenkov. Can't
Oh
think of
man,
anyone.
how
I,
could I
I,
forget Volchenkov? Yeah.
I think Stefan DaCosta might have worn it.
Oh yes.
I think he might have been the only other player to wear it. I'm going to pull that up real quick. But if so, I mean, either way, that's going to look sick. Seeing that 24 back on that style of jersey, you're going to be
Absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah, Volchenkov, I mean, Sens legend. And DaCosta was one of those players. I think there was a tweet out that said, name a player that you thought was going to turn out to be a superstar,
And just
um,
couldn't.
and never ended up making it for whatever reason. Stefan DaCosta was like, at the time, I was so high on that guy. I thought his passing was insane. Like, I thought this guy is going to be definitely the next number one center for the team. It never amounted to anything.
I think if you look at that time period of like 2010 to about 2013, our player development in Ottawa was crap.
Yeah.
And I think ever since then, you've started to see it improve. You had your anomaly with Erik Karlsson, and I don't really know how much of that really can be contributed to Ottawa's player development. I think Karlsson was just different.
He was going to be that guy no matter
But
what.
you look at guys like Matt Pumple or Shane Prince that we selected in the first round, I think in like 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Even Cody Ceci and whatnot. I feel like there were, and Curtis Lazar, there was a good like 5-6 year gap where our player development was garbage.
Absolutely.
And now it seems like over the last 3-4 years, our player development has improved greatly. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about, is that like Sean Donovan, Jesse Winchester, Clark MacArthur have done a great job at that.
Yeah, and I think that, along with, again, having just a huge number of prospects in the system, it allows you to kind of slow the process down, as opposed to before when we're talking about other players that were Curtis Lazar, kind of Cody Ceci, kind of rushed into their roles because Ottawa was a competitive team at the time. So it was about surrounding the core players with these young players that were kind of coming up, and now it's more about making sure that you maximize these guys' potential.
Yeah, I mean, I was one person who loved the Zibanejad trade, and it's not because I didn't like Zibanejad. I just felt like he wasn't living up to his potential in Ottawa. His mind was elsewhere, and Brassard was a very important piece to that 2017 run. I think people forget about that. Short term, it worked out. Long term, it didn't. But I'm also very happy to see Zibanejad have success and kind of mature in New York. And I think that's something that Ottawa looked back on and like, okay, this was only a couple years ago, but what can we do differently so this doesn't happen? And I think that's why they're a little bit more reluctant to give up on a guy like Logan Brown, who's been in the system since 2016 and has been to almost every camp since then, but doesn't seem to just be able to crack it. And I know Boucher didn't really like him. And DJ Smith was like, he's good. We just don't want him playing in a bottom six role. And I think that like those are learning steps that Pierre Dorian has learned from as a time as GM.
Yeah, and they're taking, like you said, they're taking a more patient approach, and hopefully we get to see Logan come to camp. I'm still somewhat unsure if Ottawa does see him in the long-term picture, or if they see him even make it past this offseason. I know, they're definitely talking about acquiring a center, and I kind of wonder if Logan Brown isn't part of whatever package is sent out, if it's via trade. But I like the raw skill of Logan Brown. Definitely like what he brings on the power play. And I think analytically as well, a number of people have mentioned that he's actually not too bad. Like, he can drive play. He can make those around him better. Certainly in the AHL, he can do that. We need to see him play with more intensity and more pace. But I think you're right. I think they're very hesitant because of, what Mika Zibanejad turned out to be, to move on from a big potential number one center like Logan Brown, who's still really young. And some guys, especially some guys that size, they just don't hit their curve until a little bit later.
And I'm pretty sure, I think that I might be mistaken on this. If I remember correctly, he went from like 6 feet or like 5'11" to 6'6" during his draft year. Like the summer of his draft year, he grew ridiculously, and he's just like had to spend his entire draft year learning how to play with his size. And he's I think 6'8" on skates. That's a tall man. That's a big man on skates. And I think that has been a struggle for him.
Yeah, especially when, like you said, you sprout kind of overnight in a way, and you go from being a 6 foot person on skates to 6'4" in a matter of a year, and suddenly you've got to change the way you play the game. I mean, your balance would be off, and just the sheer force and amount of energy you have to exert to skate, I mean, would be totally different than a 6 foot player. So I like what you said there. I think a player his size could develop slower, and especially one that hit his growth spurt a little bit later on.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm excited to see. Before we go to break, the AHL came out and said that they're hoping for a December 4th startup. There's talk that they might push it back to whenever the NHL starts because they want it aligned. But there's certain GMs that are like, no, let's start early. We want our players playing. Looking at the Belleville, like whatever Belleville roster we can get, if the AHL were to start early, that is ridiculous because we'd be looking at like Norris, Batherson, Abramov, Thompson, Brandstrom, all these guys coming in to start the season. And, they have they have a chip on their shoulder because of how last season ended. They were primed, them in Milwaukee were primed for like a Calder Cup run, and it just got taken away from them.
As a Sens fan, that was the most disappointing thing. Just seeing Belleville having to end their season before we got to see what they could do in the playoffs. And like you said, I think that team would be absolutely dominant in the American Hockey League. And then potentially, if he's healed on time, adding a player like Tim Stützle maybe to see him develop on the smaller ice surface would be interesting as well. I'm not sure if the timelines would add up December 4th if he'd have enough training in there because he's out 6 to 8 weeks.
I think because it's an upper body, like it's a hand injury. He can still skate. He can do the cardio stuff. I don't think it's that, and since it's on his like offhand, it's not on his shooting hand. Mm-hmm. I think it makes it easier for him to be able to come over and be with the team and finish his rehab in Belleville and start skating in Belleville than it would be if it was, a leg injury or, a hip injury.
Yeah, and it definitely adds, that would add another element to an already stacked Belleville team in the American Hockey League it would put them over the top completely. It would give them the best start, theoretically, of any team down there.
Yeah, you would have Decord and Gustafson and you would still get a guy like Balsers who would still be eligible to go down, and you have Sokorov there, and you have a couple of other guys. So it'd be interesting to really see what that team would look like come the start of the year if they were to start December 4th, because we know a couple of those guys are going to be up in the NHL if it doesn't. Yeah,
that would just be a scary and fun team to watch. I would definitely be making the trip to Belleville if they opened it up to fans.
I think for the AHL you would have to, because you are such a gate-driven league. They don't have the same kind of TV revenue that the NHL has. And even the NHL wants fans in the stands in some capacity. So I think if there is a start at all, like a December 4th start date, there's going to be a certain percentage of fans. Let it be, I don't know how big. I know Belleville's arena isn't that big. You could probably fit a couple hundred people in there, socially distanced. I'm not really sure about the other ones, and I think Toronto you could do it. Maybe in Laval you could. I think in the States you're more than safe to do it. So it'd be interesting. It's more the travel thing, I think, is the big one. The cross border travel.
Yeah, the whole thing will be interesting. I'm interested to see what the NHL even does in terms of throwing bubbles together, whatever they plan on doing divisionally, or like you said, cross-border travel. I know things have been splurged out a little bit in terms of maybe they'll do an all-Canadian division, or there's been a few fun ideas, but I'm not even sure what the American Hockey League would do either. So it's interesting. I think it makes for a really good talking point right now until we have some firm information. And I'm sure we'll get that soon because, theoretically, training camp will start early for some of the teams, us included. So that'll be interesting too.
Yeah, and I mean, 2 weeks early, that could mean a lot of things. We'll jump into that because we do have the World Junior stuff coming up. We have the 2021 season predictions and kind of lineup predictions coming up after the break. So thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to subscribe. Follow myself and Derek on Twitter, Derek at dlee075, myself, Sens_hour. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right. So thank you guys for joining in. Derek's alongside with me from SenShot. If you haven't heard from him or read any of his stuff, definitely go check it out. Great writer. Thank you for being here, Derek.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
First half hour was great. We're on to the second half hour. Like before the break, we talked about Pierre Dorion, Connor Brown, Anthony Duclair. Now we got to talk about the off-season or upcoming season projections and their lineup roster. We've all done it on Twitter. We've all looked at who could be on the roster, how it could shake up. So we're going to start. We're going to start first line. How do you think that shakes up for the 2021 season?
Yeah, I mean, right now I have it Tkachuk on the left side. I have Colin White playing the top line with Evgeny Dadonov on the right side. So there's a few changes you could make. Definitely the center ice position is the most kind of questionable. And I do wonder what the plan is for Pierre Dorion in terms of, shaking the roster up even more in the off season. So I wonder about that position specifically. How do you have it?
Top line, I mean, I think, like you said, it's going to be most likely Tkachuk and Dadonov on the wings. Center, you can kind of toss in anywhere. I think they'll give Anisimov the actual ability to play number one with Dadonov. I think they want, because I'm pretty sure they skate together. They've skated together in the offseason before. They've taught they're close with each other and whatnot. I think DJ Smith will try to continue that chemistry and see what they can do together. So I'm going to put that as my first line. Obviously, that center ice position you can kind of toss and turn, but I think Anisimov gets the chance at number one.
Love it. Yeah, and I like what you said. I think that's very realistic. It's a good way to look at it. He's played on top lines before, and he could definitely be there. So I like the line.
Second line, what are you doing for the second line?
Yeah, so I think that's where Timmy Stützle will hopefully slot in if he makes the team out of camp. I think there's still some question as to whether he'll make it, but I do think they'll at least give him a 9-game kind of sample size look coming out of training camp. I've got Chris Tierney right now slotted in the middle and Drake Batherson on the right side.
Yeah, that would be a pretty good second line. For me, I'm going to take Stützle out of the picture completely because until he signs his contract, I'm not really gonna play with him just because who knows what's going on. I know there's some sort of people are talking about how he might not, like European players might not be eligible because they're under contract and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously the team feels confident, the players feel confident that he's going to be here come camp, but until it happens, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical. It's just kind of how the organization works. I'm going to go second line. I'm going to go Balcers at my left wing. Ooh. I think DJ Smith really likes him. I think according to Bruce Garriock and others, he had the best camp out of any AHL forward, better than Batherson, better than Brown. And up until his injury, he was slotted in as that, second, third line left winger. I think he'll continue that without Duclair here. I think that's an opening for him to slot in on that second wing or second line left wing slot. I'm going to put Josh Norris in the middle. I think he takes a big step this year. He's going to go down the middle, and I'm going to put Batherson on the right side. I think they had chemistry going in the AHL. DJ Smith loves the chemistry. I think that's a lineup that, even if it's not together permanently, I think that's a lineup that they would want to see start the season in some capacity.
I love it, Shane. That's a fun lineup. I mean, that's a lot of youth and a lot of fun in that lineup. I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we have to clarify that. Like, DJ Smith doesn't have your typical 1 through 4. Just because you're put up on the top line on the board doesn't mean you're going to get top line minutes. If it depends on how you play that game. He benched a couple of players here and there. So, even though we're putting him at the second line, doesn't mean they're going to play second line. So before everyone jumps down my throat for that.
No, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people get stuck on is, especially when you're making these, hypothetical lines, people get stuck on the numbers. Oh, there's no way this guy's a third line player. And it's like, well, no, like he could be dispersed in second line minutes, maybe first line minutes, depending on the situations that the guy plays in and, where the coach plays him that night. So I like what you said about that as well.
So what about third line? We're getting into the nitty gritty of the lineup.
Yeah, so I have Alex Formenton making the team. So that's my kind of hot take for that line. I'm a huge Formenton fan. I watched him all along the way. He's from Barrie. I grew up close to Barrie. So I've watched him play funky things like ball hockey. And I'm just like, man, that kid has always stood out to me. I have definitely some high praise for Formenton, probably most than others. So left winger, Alex Formenton. In the middle, I like Logan Brown over Josh Norris in the immediacy right now if he makes it that far. And again, I've expressed that I believe Ottawa will probably look at moving him potentially this offseason, but maybe not. Maybe they give him a longer look. And then on the right side, that's where if our guy Connor Brown signs his contract, that's where I have him.
Yeah, see, I love that line. I think I've been a huge Formenton fan myself. When it said that Duclair wasn't coming back, and I'm like, cool. I think Formenton's a better version of Duclair. He brings all the same kind of like speed, tangibles, all that. He had a great rookie year out in the AHL with Belleville. I like him at the third line. So I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna slot him in the third line right now. Looking at who we have, I think him being on a third line, him and Balcer flipping between third, second line is a great thing for the organization. For the third line center, I'm going to go Chris Tierney. I think he's a guy who can fit anywhere in the lineup, and I think him being in that like shutdown kind of role who can give you some scoring, he's going to be on your penalty kill. I like it. On the right side, if Connor Brown signs, it's going to be Connor Brown. It just has to be the way it is for that. So I think we're on the same page outside of the center for that third line.
We just flip centers from second and third lines, but yeah, same page there.
So how are you going to finish it off?
Yeah, so to finish the forward group off, I think Nick Paul is the obvious slotted left winger there. I guess you could make an argument, but I have Paul there. You had Anisimov playing top line. I have him on my fourth line, but as I said before, I do agree with what you said. He did help bring Dadonov here, and I could definitely see a scenario where they want some experience on that top line. But I have Anisimov playing my fourth line, and then Austin Watson being the intimidator, playing that right wing position on the fourth line.
I don't know if I remember. I may have missed it, but did you mention Colin White in this?
Yeah, I have him on my top line on my first
as
line.
Your center. Okay.
Yeah, with Tkachuk and Dadonov.
I don't know why I thought you just missed them. So we basically just swapped centers because I have Colin White right now on my fourth line. And it's no disrespect to Colin White. I just feel like him playing with Nick Paul and Austin Watson would be great. I think they met. I think him and Nick Paul really work well together. They complement each other relatively well. You adding in some toughness with a little bit of scoring, like a little bit of finish, should be good. You can kind of give him, especially at home, I think he'll thrive a lot more at home because you can give him the better matchups. And defensively, he can handle playing those tougher matchups. So I like White at the fourth line. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing the top line or the second line at some point. But yeah, I think, Paul, White, and Watson will round out the forward group for me.
Yeah, I love it. And I think we're talking about four lines that I think, like we said before, will be maybe not evenly distributed, but on several different nights, depending on who's going that night, could definitely be distributed relatively evenly. So I wouldn't get too hung up on kind of what we put together in terms of numbering the lines.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I mean, I think overall, everyone can agree that the roster construction is going to be something similar to this. Add in Stutzel and kind of replace whoever he's taking out. So we're moving on to the defense because this one is where it gets tricky. I think we all know who's going to be our top left. Like I think our left side's pretty much set.
Yeah.
But how do you see the first pairing going?
Yeah. So right now I have Shabbat with Zaitsev still. I don't know that there's anyone that Ottawa acquired that's going to pass Zaitsev. But I never really liked the Shabbat with Zaitsev pairing from last season. So, do they try him with other guys? Probably. But at the end of the day, I think they might take the veteran in Zaitsev and kind of leave him there. But that's my take on it.
Yeah, I have obviously Shabbat. There was an interview with Josh Brown, and it sounded like they kind of told him that that top pairing spot beside Shabbat is up for grabs, and it's anyone's for the taking. And they're going to play anyone with him and see how everyone fits. I like Josh Brown beside Shabbat at my top pair.
Yeah, that would be my preference as well. But I think so yeah, my thinking was kind of what it will amount and what it will end up being. I do like the opportunity of Shabbat and Brown. I think Brown is a guy who, again, analytically gives you a lot more than someone like Zaitsev. But he has a relatively small sample size. I think he played like 54 games last year or something. And he's not a point getter. He's not really a puck mover, but he's a stable defensive guy who can play physical. And I think they mentioned that they like his ability to box people out in front of the net. So that's what Josh Brown will give you, and very similar options. I think all three players on the right side give you a very similar skill set.
Yeah, that's for sure. I do agree on that. So moving on to your second pairing, I feel like I have a guess who it's going to be, but let's hear it.
Well, I didn't go with Brandstrom, so I have Brandstrom down in the American Hockey League to start. I went with Wolanin, number 24, donning the number 24, and on his right side I have Josh Brown because I think that will provide him with a nice, stable D partner. And I think Wolanin, coming off the injury-riddled season he had last year, he'll need a lot of stability and a lot of help to hopefully use some of his offensive weapons. And he's 25 years old, so we've got to start seeing something at the NHL level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I branched from starting in the AHL with Thompson. You're going to probably see that as the top pairing in Belleville. I have Christian Wolanin as my second, pairing lefty. I have him with Zub. I think you don't sign a guy not to play him in the NHL. Yeah, if you're a Russian, you don't sign in North America to play in the AHL. It just doesn't make any sense. I feel like he's going to be given a shot. I feel like they're going to give him a legitimate shot at playing top four pairing. So that's why I have at as my second line, my second unit.
Yeah, I love that.
So what about now? How are you going to finish it off?
So to finish it off, Mike Riley slotting in on the left side provides some good offense again and puck movement. And beside him, Eric Goodbranson. Goodbranson, he's still making $4 million on his cap hit. So I do see him as an NHL player, and I have Zub as an NHL player, but he's like the seventh defenseman on my list. He's just a wild card for me. I don't know if we know what we're going to get from Zub. I've watched some videos that were available, and he seems like he has good length and mobility. But if he could move the puck better than, say, an Eric Goodbranson or a Nikita Zaitsev, he might end up passing them. So I like it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me, basically the same. I have Mike Riley, but I have Zaitsev on my third pairing with Goodbranson as my seventh defenseman. I feel like, we got rid of Borowiecki because realistically, I don't think Goodbranson's going to be here next year. It's going to be kind of one of those we're going to have you in as our seventh defenseman because you're, is better than an option like Golubath or England. But we also don't, we don't feel comfortable giving Borowiecki 2 years as the seventh defenseman. So I think Goodbranson slots in as that third pairing defenseman, kind of play the matchups depending on how Zub or Brown do. He's a guy with over 700 games experience. So I think people are going to call me crazy for having him as the seventh defenseman. But, I think him and Zaitsev, you can toss in as that third pairing between the two. There's a good chance that Zaitsev isn't even on the roster come next season. So who knows what they want to do? Who knows? I think would you be willing giving up a second round pick to Seattle to take him? Probably. I would. I would give up a second round pick for Seattle to take him. Or you just hope that they take him without giving up a pick.
Yeah, I don't know if they would do any favors like that to us, but I love the second round pick idea, and having to give up. It kind of sucks that you have to give up an asset to get rid of somebody, but Zaitsev certainly isn't going to live up to that contract. I think we know what he is now, and that's a third pairing at best, right shot defenseman, and he's making way too much money to play that role. So. I would love to see Zaitsev as the guy out, to be honest. But that right side is just so interchangeable. I mean, Zaitsev, Brown, Goodbranson, and Zub. I honestly don't know. You could slot them from 1 to 3 in any way that you pick, and you could make a case for it.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, goaltenders, it's Murray and Hogberg. I don't think we need to dive too much into that. No. But yeah, I think defense is our biggest question mark in terms of how it's going to shape up, especially that right side. Then the left side, unless Brandstrom has an incredible camp, blows the water out of everybody, I think he's starting in the AHL, just like Thompson. And we're gonna have a rough year on the right side, but I think it's going to be worth it. We have to think of, expansion drafts and whatnot. But, we're running out of time. We got about 15, 20 minutes left. So we got to jump into the World Junior talk. They just announced the World Junior schedule. There's going to be 3 games a day, starting on Christmas Day. Camp, I think, 2 weeks beforehand. This is an interesting one. We got a lot of prospects who are eligible. I think we got 2 or 3 for the U.S. that they seem interested in, with Sanderson, Pinto. We have Stutzel, obviously, for Germany. There's a lot going on for this World Juniors.
Absolutely. And the first thing I wonder about is if Ottawa is going to take a cautious approach with Timmy Stützle and, not allow him to participate in the World Juniors. But I think a lot of people are making the case for the other side, getting him ready for the season, playing on the smaller ice surface and dominating against his peers. I think we all want to see it. And I think Canada even opens up their tournament against Timmy Stützle, who will ultimately be the captain of Germany. And that'll just be so exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what he can do again. Excited to see Sanderson. If you haven't heard about what's going on with UND, you should be really excited, because that top pairing, the projected top pairing at UND, is Sanderson and Bernard Docker.
Yeah.
So that should tell you how high up UND is on Sanderson being a true freshman, playing with basically their best player defensively in Bernard Docker. So Sanderson's most likely going to be the top pairing defenseman, depending on who's available. Come the World Juniors. Pinto's most likely going to be the number 1 center. So Ottawa fans have a lot of looking forward to come. And I think Craig is touted as one of the players for Team Canada, if I'm not mistaken. I know there was talk that he could also be heading to the World Juniors. So, and Järventie could be there. I think he's still eligible for Finland. We could have like 5 or 6 prospects at this World Juniors, depending on how it shakes up.
We're going to have a ton of prospects to follow. I mean, like we do now. I think Sens Prospects on Twitter always gives you the greatest updates on how these guys are doing. It's great to see, our guys being productive overseas right now, playing in Europe. The World Juniors for the last few years has been something that Sens fans really look forward to, because there's just so many players to watch. And this year is going to be even more so. Like you said, we're going to have players that are playing prominent roles on their teams in this year's World Juniors, and we're hockey starved, from a Sens perspective. So there's just a ton to look forward to in the World Juniors. I'm looking forward to Jake Sanderson probably the most. He's the player that I was talking about for the longest amount of time, I think on Twitter, as Ottawa probably drafting. Took a lot of heat for it, but
yes, I remember that.
yeah, definitely took some heat for it, but that's okay. Because I really like what Sanderson brings to the Ottawa Senators. So I think people will finally get a chance to see that at the World Juniors. And then everyone's going to, look back at their old tweets and hit delete because they're going to be like, oh, okay, that's why we drafted that guy. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't like Sanderson at 5 just because I figured we might like if you were on my Sens or Twitter, if you go through, I'm back and forth of would 2 forwards really be beneficial? Would be getting a defenseman? I think I came down to the conclusion of just trading down. Just trade it, get rid of it, move down if you want to pick a guy like Sanderson or you want to pick another forward. Trade down, you can get more for it. I like Sanderson. I like Sanderson since the start of the year. I had him touted in the 10 to 15 range. If that's where the San Jose pick landed, if he was on the board in that range, I say go for it. At number 5, do I think it's a little bit of a reach? Probably not, considering everything else that I've seen and heard from him. But only time will tell to see how it works out. Our left side's pretty swamped. It just means that there's a chance that maybe Brandstrom moves to the right. We'll have to wait and see what DJ and Co want to do, but it definitely makes our top 6 a lot more frightening with a guy like Sanderson.
Yeah, I think he was the missing element. I think I've said this before, but if you're looking at acquiring a top 6 right winger, let's say, for example, if that's who you would have drafted in that 5 position, it's a lot easier to do so. If you look at the market and kind of who's out there, Patrick Laine, you could have signed Taylor Hall in free agency. If you're looking at, these high-end forward players, they're easier to acquire than someone like Jake Sanderson. I mean, if you're projecting Sanderson to be anywhere close to Miro Heiskanen, which I think is, on the high side of what we're projecting, but even, someone else like Seth Jones, let's say, for example, like how often do these players come available on the market? They never do. And when the forwards come available, the teams shopping these forwards are always looking to improve their top 4 defensemen. So, teams like Winnipeg, they're shopping Laine to improve their D.
Yeah, and I think Ottawa fans need to be patient. Seth Jones wasn't where he was when he was traded. Like, I think that's something that people need to remember, was that when Seth Jones was traded to Columbus for Ryan Johansson, he wasn't near the elite level that he is at now. He grew, people called Hedman a bust within the first 3 before his entry level contract was over. And I think fans are very quick to jump on the gun. Sanderson's going to take a little bit more seasoning. Who knows? It depends on how long he stays at UND. If he stays at UND the same amount of time Bernard Docker is, I expect him to jump right into the NHL. You're a top 5 pick. You spend, 2-3 years at UND. I expect you to jump into the NHL right away. Obviously, maybe it's a wild expectation. I don't know. But I'm interested to see his development. I like what UND has done. So he's going to be a guy to watch for the next year or two and see what happens with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think he projects as an NHL player in a couple of years, for sure, right from UND right to the NHL. Yeah, he's not the flashiest player. I mean, you could make an argument that, they passed up a lot of skill up front, and that's definitely an argument you could make, and we'll have to wait and see how Cole Perfetti and Marco Rossi and whoever they passed up develops. I like the Rossi jersey behind you too, but but yeah, at the same time, I think Sanderson, like I said, brings an element that Ottawa was missing to their D, and also makes their D core as a whole a lot stronger, and something that they really haven't had for a number of years. And teams that win championships have strong D. So
that's for sure. I mean, you look at St. Louis; they were kind of powered by their defense. Even Tampa, you had Hedman, McDonough, Shattenkirk. He turned that into a great deal in Anaheim. Luke Schengen and Zach Bogosian kind of came out of the woodworks and helped. So, defense helps win championships. That's definitely for sure. Before we wrap up, I'm going to introduce a new segment, Sens Hour Over Under. You can bet on anything nowadays. So, we're going to look at every episode. We're going to look at something new, either it be, a team's win like win total over under, players points or goals, goalies win percentage wins, whatever the case may be. If you have any suggestions on what you want us to look at, definitely let us know on Twitter. As someone who loves this over under stuff, I thought this was a great way to kind of bring a betting element to the podcast without actually having to go out and bet your own money. So we're going to look today. We're looking at Matt Murray's on a potential over under on wins and save percentage going into next season. This one's going to be tricky because the team around him may not be the best defensively, so that could skew numbers. Looking at his last couple of years, it's kind of hard to see what he'll be. So I have Matt Murray at an over-under of 22.5 wins with an over-under of a save percentage of 0.910. What are you taking on for the wins? Are you taking over-under, and are you taking the over-under on the save percentage?
I like it. So you have 22.5 for your wins?
For my wins, and then 0.910 save percentage over under.
So last season, Murray played 38 games. He had 20 wins last season. He's going to get more games this year if he's healthy. I think he'll get, upwards of 50, maybe even more starts for Ottawa. So for wins, I'm going to take the over. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 wins would be really, really nice for Matt Murray.
Is that including, because shootout overtime losses count as half a win? And the reason why I took 22.5 is because I don't know how many games, depending on the schedule, right? I think him and Hogberg will probably get a good amount of starts, and depending on how the length of. So are we also including overtime wins on this? Are we going to bump it up a little bit on the over if it is?
Yeah, no, that's a solid point because that definitely changes the numbers. So yeah, if we're including them, I'll stick to the over. I'll say that he's going to get over. But if we're changing the number up, that might move it under.
Yeah, because last year he actually had 22.5 wins exactly last year. The year before he had 31 or 32.5. He had 29.5 the previous year, and then had 34. So he's up near the 30 range or close to the 30 range the last couple of years. Personally, I'm going to take the over. I'm going to go 29, just a straight 29.
That's good. That's high.
Yeah, and I mean, with Hogberg, again, like I said earlier, Hogberg is still gonna challenge. He was riding the wave. I think he has a little bit of disrespect on his shoulder, being like, "Oh, you don't think I can handle being a number one? I'm gonna show you who can be a number one." And I think as much as they want to say Matt Murray's the number one and how much he's penciled in as the number one, if Matt Murray struggles and Hogberg comes in to relieve and he starts playing well, Hogberg is gonna get the net. And the chances of us playing a full 82-game season, I'm not high on it. Going to be a lot of back-to-backs. So I'm going to say 29 wins is a good number. And if you're a betting man, I would take the over on Matt Murray. I would never take the under on Matt Murray for wins.
Yeah, I like it. I'm with you. I'm going over 22.5 as well. Probably closer to 25 for me, but I'm definitely taking the over.
That's fair. So moving on to the save percentage. He's had, above 910 3 out of the 5 years as a starter. Last year he was under 900. I think 910 is a very reasonable save percentage. What are you taking?
Yeah, his career high, I think, came in 16-17 at 923. So, I mean, he had a great season that year in terms of save percentage with a bigger sample size. I think he might have had higher the year before, but it was a small sample size. For 910, I think that's going to be tough to achieve for Matt Murray on the Ottawa Senators. He came off an 899, so below 900. I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say 905.
Yeah, you know what, I agree. And you look at the way Nielsen and Hongberg and Anderson save percentage. I believe they were all under 910 for most of the year. I'm going to take the under on Matt Murray, but I'm not going to take. I'm going to go back to his 2017-18 number, and I'm going to do 907.
Love it.
I think he's going to be right there. He's going to nip it, but there's going to be a couple of games where he just gets blown out because our team isn't he's going to face a team like Tampa or Boston or Vegas, depending on how the schedule works, and it's just going to be one of those games where nothing goes right for him. And I think there's going to be a couple of those. We saw it last year with Hogberg against Pittsburgh. It was like 6-2. I think there's going to be a couple of those games. And I think it's going to kind of fluctuate the number, but I'd have to go under.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely potential there. You start having some games, like you said, that you're giving up 3 goals on 17 shots or, whatever it is. And it doesn't look so good. And then, the save percentage is going to dip pretty low on those games. But, on the plus side, he'll be getting a lot of shots, and he is a goalie that thrives on work. So there is potential that he could get over, but I think the safe bet is definitely under 910.
100%. So you heard it here, folks. If you're a betting man and you want to bet on a player's success, I'm going to take the over on Matt Murray's win total. Take the under on his save percentage. No numbers have been officially released, so this is all just pure speculation. Once numbers are released, whenever the season starts, we're going to take a look at some of these actual hard numbers that have been set up, and we're going to tell you to take the over-under. So you're going to want to stay tuned. Every week, we're going to be dropping out these truth bombs, these over-under totals. Thank you, Derek, for joining me. It was a pleasure having you. We talk constantly on Twitter, so it's nice to finally, talk face-to-face somewhat.
Absolutely, Shane. Thank you so much for having me. Enjoyed the time.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have you on at some point in the near future.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, that's all for this episode. Follow Derek at dlee075 at Twitter. Check out his stuff on SenShot. Great articles. Follow the Sens Hour on Twitter and Instagram, Sens_hour. Follow me at Shane_Ryan97. And yeah, stay tuned for more great content. We'll be back here next week with a brand new episode. Thank you again, Derek, for coming on, and hopefully talk soon.
Thanks, guys.